I stood in the doorway, clutching the crumpled pages of Emily's medical diagnosis in my shaking hand. Stage 4 cancer, her last chance, an experimental treatment that could buy her time we desperately needed. But that treatment came with a cost far beyond what I could manage alone. Inside the apartment, the Chicago skyline glittered through glass walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. Sleek chrome furniture, spotless counters, everything shining as though my children had built their lives in a showroom. But to me it felt sterile, cold, a place where love couldn't survive. Eric, my son, sat sprawled across a leather couch, his tailored suit jacket tossed casually aside. He scrolled his phone with the smug detachment of someone who had never worked a night shift or skipped meals just to make sure his kids had what they needed. Laura, my daughter, perched nearby, her gold bracelet catching the light as she adjusted it. More interested in the perfect reflection of herself in the glass than in me, I cleared my throat. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "It's your mother. She needs this treatment. I can't cover it alone. Please help me." Eric didn't even look up. He gave a short, sharp laugh. "Your mess, Dad, not mine." Laura's eyes flicked to mine, but only for a moment. Then she returned to her phone and nodded silently, as though agreeing that my plea was nothing more than a nuisance. I felt the weight of decades pressing on my chest. Decades of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, empty retirement accounts. Every dollar I had scraped together had gone into their futures. I had been their safety net, their provider, their shield against the world. And now, when Emily needed them, when I needed them, they turned away. I dropped the report onto the pristine glass coffee table. It landed with a soft thud, but the sound felt like a scream. Eric shoved it away with a single dismissive finger like it was garbage. "You think I'm dipping into my savings for this?" he sneered. "Get real." I turned to Laura, desperate for even a shred of compassion. "Please," I begged. "Say something. Do something." She rose, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she drifted to the window. Her reflection stared, back at her sharp and beautiful, but her eyes never met mine. "We can't afford it, Dad," she said softly, almost gently. But the words cut deeper than Eric's sneer. I stood there, feeling the room close in on me, suffocating me. Their betrayal wasn't just neglect, it was a declaration. I had loved them, raised them, given everything I had, and in my moment of need they had nothing for me. I picked the report back up, the paper edges biting into my palm. My legs felt like lead as I walked to the door. I looked back one last time. Eric was already lost in his phone again. Laura stood like a statue against the window, indifferent. No words came. There was nothing left to say. The door clicked shut behind me, sharp and final. Out in the hallway, the weight of their betrayal pressed against me like a vice. Emily's fate was sealed not just by illness, but by the children she had given everything to. They wouldn't come to her rescue, they wouldn't even stand by her side. And in that moment, a quiet promise rooted itself in my chest. I would remember this. I would make them feel this pain, not with blood, but with justice. One way or another, they would pay. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, if you've ever given everything to someone, only to have them turn their back when you needed them most, then you already know a fraction of what I felt that night. I wasn't just a husband watching the woman I loved fade away. I was a father, left abandoned by the very children I had sacrificed my life for. And in that hollow silence, sitting alone in my old car while they lived in luxury, one truth became crystal clear. Justice wasn't going to find them on its own. I had to make it happen. And let me tell you, when I finally struck back, when the weight of their choices came crashing down on them, it wasn't rage that fueled me. It was something colder, sharper. Justice. So if you've ever dreamed of seeing karma catch up to the people who deserve it most, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're listening from, because this is the story of how I turned their betrayal into their downfall. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital corridors, hushed conversations, and the steady, merciless ticking of a clock I couldn't stop. Emily fought bravely. God, she fought. Her smile, though thinner and more fragile, still carried warmth. Every time I walked into her room. But no smile could hide the truth. Without that treatment, her body was losing ground. Every night, I sat by her bed, holding her hand, praying for a miracle. And every night, that miracle slipped further away. I called Eric, no answer. I left messages for Laura, no reply. When Emily asked if the kids would visit, I lied. I told her they were busy, but that they loved her. I couldn't let her die with... Tell the truth, that her own children had abandoned her. Then one evening it happened. Her breaths came shallow, uneven. The monitor beeped slower, weaker. She looked at me, eyes clouded but still filled with love. "Take care of them," she whispered. Even then, even in her final breath, she thought of them. And then she was gone. The world should have stopped, should have shattered. But outside her room, life went on. Nurses moving briskly, machines humming, the city beyond the window glowing. Indifferent. I held her hand long after it had grown cold. The woman I had built my life with, sacrificed for, loved more than myself. Gone. The funeral came. A small service. Friends from the old neighborhood. A few cousins, neighbors who remembered her kindness. But not Eric, not Laura. They didn't even send flowers. I stood by the grave, watching as they lowered her into the earth. My chest burned, but no tears came. Not then. Not anymore. Grief had calcified into something harder, something sharper. When the priest finished, I stayed behind as the others left. Alone, staring at the fresh mound of dirt, I whispered a promise. "They'll pay for this, Emily. For what they did to you, for what they did to us. I swear it." As I turned to leave, a strange calm settled over me. Not peace. No, I would. Never know peace again. But purpose, because now I had nothing left to lose. After Emily's funeral, the house was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort but gnaws at you, reminding you of what's missing. I sat in her favorite chair, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the cushions, and let the reality settle. She was gone, and our children hadn't even shed a tear. They didn't show up for the burial. They didn't call afterward. No flowers, no condolences, nothing. Eric posted photos from a weekend golf trip, grinning. With friends, champagne in hand. Laura uploaded selfies from a gala, her gown shimmering like she hadn't just buried her mother in absentia. Each image was a knife, twisting deeper. But knives can cut both ways. I started watching them differently. Not as children, not anymore, but as people who had debts to pay. Debts not in dollars, but in dignity, loyalty, love, and I would collect. So I watched, carefully. Eric was reckless with money, though he pretended otherwise. He flaunted designer suits and expensive dinners, but beneath the surface, cracks showed, overdue bills, short tempers with creditors, whispers of failed investments. Laura hid hers behind a perfect smile, but her vanity was a trap of its own. Every purchase, every party, every post online was an obsession with appearances. She lived for eyes on her, for admiration, for status, and I realized something important. Their weakness wasn't that they lacked money. It was that they worshipped it. They thought wealth and image could shield them from the world, from responsibility, from consequence, but if those shields shattered, they would crumble. So I began my work quietly. I met with old contacts, people who remembered the man I used to be before I sacrificed everything for a family that spat me out. Some owed me favors, others just respected the kind of grit that doesn't die easily. And slowly I pieced together a plan. I didn't want blood, I didn't want prison bars or chaos. No, my revenge would be meticulous, precise, a mirror held up to them, forcing them to choke on their own selfishness. Weeks passed, and every time I saw Eric boasting about a new deal or Laura flaunting jewelry she barely paid for, my resolve sharpened. They thought they had buried me with Emily. They thought the old man, the quiet provider, would fade into obscurity. But they had forgotten something crucial. I was the one who built their foundations. I paid for their schools, their homes, their safety nets. Without me, they were nothing, and now I would remind them, one move at a time. Revenge isn't loud at first. It's patient. It waits in the shadows, building piece by piece until the moment is right. Eric was my first target. His empire was a castle built on sand, all show, no foundation. I didn't need to invent lies. I only needed to uncover the ones he had already buried. Through old friends in finance, I traced his deals, his shortcuts, his forged signatures. Sloppy work, hidden behind arrogance. One night, while he slept comfortably in his penthouse, those files landed on the desk of a man who had once been his closest partner. Betrayal doesn't need much fuel to catch fire. By the end of the week, Eric was knee-deep in lawsuits. Clients pulled out, partners turned cold, investors stopped answering his calls. He tried to bluff, to charm, but the more he flailed, the deeper he sank. The tabloids ate it up. Young tycoon on the brink, they called him. And I smiled. Not out of joy, out of justice. Then came Laura. Her weakness wasn't numbers, and it was attention. She thrived on admiration, the envy of others. Without it, she was nothing. So I gave the world a clearer look at her. For months she had been siphoning funds from a charity she was managing, using donations meant for children to fuel her lavish lifestyle. Again, I didn't lie. I didn't need to. I simply connected. The dots for a journalist eager for a headline. The story broke like a thunderclap. Her friends? Gone. Her invitations? Revoked. Online, her name trended, not with praise, but with mockery. Charity queen caught stealing from kids. She tried to fight back, of course, public apologies, crocodile tears. But the world doesn't forgive. Vanity exposed. And every attempt she made only confirmed the truth. I watched them both unravel from a distance. Eric drowning in debt, his phone buzzing with calls he couldn't answer. Laura locked inside her apartment, curtains drawn, her mirror no longer a comfort but a curse, and in each fall, I saw justice. But revenge wasn't just about tearing them down. It was about showing them who had pulled the strings, who had forced them to face what they had become. And soon, I would. The beauty of revenge is patience. You can't rush it. You let it simmer, slow and deliberate, until the moment comes when one small push topples the entire tower. For Eric, that moment came on a rainy Thursday. I had arranged for certain documents, contracts he had doctored, signatures he had forged, to find their way to the hands of his partners. Not forged evidence, not lies. Just his own carelessness exposed under the harshest light. That morning he strutted into the boardroom, confident, ready to pitch another grand deal. But instead of applause, he was met with silence. A stack of papers slid across the table toward him, his own sins staring back at him. Witnesses said he went pale, tried to deny it, tried to charm his way out. But charm doesn't erase ink. And when the board voted, the verdict was swift. Eric was out. Not just out, ruined. His reputation, the one he'd polished with such arrogance, was shredded. Investors fled. Creditors circled like vultures. The empire he flaunted collapsed in weeks, and soon he was drowning not in champagne but in debt. And then there was Laura. Her unraveling was more public, more spectacular. I made sure of that. I whispered the right words to the right journalist. A scandal about misused charity funds she had dipped into for her lavish parties. Again, not fabrication. Just the truth no one had bothered to look at until I held a spotlight over it. The article went live. And with it, Laura's carefully curated world went up in flames. Sponsors dropped her overnight. Events banned her. The glittering circle of so-called friends scattered, leaving her to face the storm alone. Online, her name became a punchline, a cautionary tale of greed and vanity. I watched from a distance as she tried to spin it, to fight back. But every denial only fueled the fire. Every excuse rang hollow. She had built her life on admiration, on the gaze of strangers. And when that gaze turned from envy to disgust, she was left with nothing. The final stroke came not with noise, but with silence. I invited them both, Eric and Laura, to the old family house, the one they hadn't set foot in since Emily passed. I didn't expect them to come, but desperation has a way of bending pride. And they came. Eric, disheveled, his tailored suit traded for wrinkled clothes. Laura, hollow-eyed, makeup smeared, the sparkle gone. They sat across from me at the same table where Emily once served them dinner, and for the first time in years they looked Small. I placed 2 envelopes on the table, one for Eric, one for Laura. Inside, not threats, not accusations, just photographs, photos of Emily, smiling, laughing, holding them as children, proof that once they were loved more than anything in this world. And beneath each photo, a note for Eric. You could have been her hero. Instead, you chose yourself. For Laura, she needed your hand. You gave her your back. They opened them in silence. No excuses, no bravado, just shame, heavy and suffocating. I didn't yell. I didn't strike them. I simply stood, walked to the door, and left them sitting there. 2 broken shells surrounded by the ghost of the woman they had abandoned. That was my final act. Not rage, not destruction, just a mirror. And it broke them more completely than any fist or fire ever could. The night after I left them in the old family house, I drove aimlessly through the city. Rain streaked across the windshield, neon lights smeared into blurs, and for the first time in months, I felt something that almost resembled peace. It wasn't joy. Joy had been buried with Emily. It wasn't triumph either. Revenge doesn't give back what's lost. It was something quieter, justice, balance. A weight finally lifted from my shoulders. Eric and Laura had chosen their path. They abandoned their mother when she needed them most. They abandoned me too. And for a long time I blamed myself, wondered if I had failed as a father, if somehow I had spoiled them into selfishness. But watching them break under the weight of their own choices, I finally understood. This wasn't my failure. It was theirs. Word spread quickly. Eric's name became poison in the business world, a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. Laura faded into obscurity, her former friends avoiding her like a curse. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply moved on. Every morning, I visited Emily's grave. I'd sit by the stone, brush away the leaves, and talk to her like she was still beside me. I told her about the quiet mornings, the way the garden was finally blooming again, the peace I was trying to build. And sometimes when the wind moved just right, I swore I could hear her voice, gentle, forgiving, as if she was telling me I'd done enough. The house was empty without her, but it was also free of the rot that had poisoned it for so long. No more lies, no more selfish laughter echoing down the halls. Just silence, and the kind of silence that heals instead of haunts. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange, I poured myself a glass of Emily's favorite wine. I sat on the porch staring at the horizon and whispered, "It's over. Love, they can't hurt us anymore." And in that moment I didn't feel alone. Not entirely, because while Eric and Laura had lost everything they worshipped, I still had something they could never reclaim. Memory. Love. The truth that Emily and I had built a life of sacrifice and devotion, even if they chose to throw it away. And that truth, more than revenge, was my victory. And that's how it ended. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with the simple, undeniable weight of truth. Sometimes revenge isn't about striking back with fire. It's about holding up a mirror so the guilty can finally see what they've become. Eric and Laura lost everything because they chose to. I just gave fate a little push, but let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, watching the people you loved turn their backs in your darkest hour, what would you have done? Would you forgive, or would you fight for the justice they refused to give? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who believes in karma as much as we do, because at the end of the day, betrayal may cut deep, but justice cuts deeper. Life has a cruel way of testing the very foundations we build. For Henry, it was not just the betrayal of his children that broke him, it was the realization that decades of sacrifice, love, and devotion could be erased by indifference. Yet, within that unbearable grief, he discovered something most of us ignore. Justice is not always about rage or destruction. Sometimes justice is the quiet balancing of scales, the reclaiming of dignity stolen by betrayal. Eric and Laura were not monsters in the traditional sense. They were products of entitlement, of choices made in arrogance, of a belief that love is disposable once comfort is achieved. Their cold refusal to stand beside their dying mother is the kind of wound that time cannot heal because it carves deep into the soul. What Henry did in response was not about cruelty. It was about holding a mirror to their lives, showing them the cost of apathy, the emptiness behind wealth and vanity when stripped of compassion. And that is where the moral of this story lies. Family is not built on money, appearances, or borrowed luxuries. It is built on presence, on sacrifice, on showing up when it matters most. Eric and Laura had every chance to honor the woman who had given them everything, yet they chose convenience over love. When the reckoning came, it was not swift violence, but patient consequence. Their reputations, their wealth, their false sense of security, all of it crumbled under the weight of their own selfishness. Many who listen to this story may wonder, was Henry right? Did he go too far? Or was this simply karma taking its natural course? The answer depends on how one defines justice. For some, forgiveness is the higher road. For others, especially those who've carried unbearable loneliness while watching a loved one fade away, forgiveness feels like betrayal to the memory of the one lost. In Henry's case, revenge became a language of love. Twisted, perhaps, but deeply human. By tearing down the false empires his children built, he honored the sacrifices Emily made throughout her life. He ensured they could no longer ignore the cost of their indifference. The lesson here is sobering. Wealth, pride, and appearances mean nothing when stripped of empathy. You can drive the finest cars, dine in the most expensive restaurants, post flawless smiles on social media. But if you abandon the people who loved you when they needed you most, those walls will eventually collapse. Life has a way of forcing us to face our debts, not always in dollars, but in the currency of conscience. Henry's actions were extreme, yes, but his reasoning resonates with anyone who has felt betrayed by the people they trusted most. It is the silent wish inside so many hearts that one day those who hurt us will finally understand the weight of their cruelty, and when that day comes, we pray it brings not just suffering, but reflection. That is where growth begins. So, if there is a truth to carry from this story, it is this: never underestimate the quiet strength of those you dismiss. Never assume that love is endless when you continuously reject it, and never forget that actions, or in this case, inactions, echo far longer than words. Eric and Laura thought they were untouchable, insulated by wealth and arrogance. But in the end, they learned that the absence of compassion is the quickest path to ruin. For those listening, let this story be more than entertainment. Let it be a reminder. Call your parents. Support the people who stood by you when you were weak. Do not wait until it's too late to honor those who gave everything for you. Because once that chance is gone, no amount of money, excuses, or apologies can bring it back. Henry's revenge may not bring Emily back, but it gave meaning to her suffering. It turned silence into consequence. And perhaps, in their darkest moments of downfall, Eric and Laura finally understood the lesson their mother had lived by every day. Family is not about convenience. It's about love, loyalty, and sacrifice.